Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP Community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telecom. Our hosted PBX is from OnSIP.com. You can go to GetOnSIP.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about ZipDX.com, full color, full feature, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the web, is hosted by Bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dialers are from Voxbone.com. All right, and this is VUC 602 for July 15th, 2016, and Michael is going to tell us about an event that's brand new that no one's ever heard of. It's called Astricon.
You're going to see probably a good number of people who've appeared on VUCs over the years at Astricon 2006 at the Renaissance Glendale Hotel and Spa in September, on the 27th through 29th. If you are an Asterisk user or into things telecom software-ish, Astricon is probably something should be on your calendar. There you go, David. How's that? Is that good? Thank you.
Sounds excellent to me. All right, so this is, as I said, our 602nd VUC. We've been doing this for 9 years, and we were able to attract quality guests all this time, and one of those guests is Sean Gibson from Telecom IO. He's the CEO. And it's great to meet you, Sean. You and I have never met before.
It's great to meet you all too, and I just want to say I'm very honored to have been invited to be a part of this, so thank you.
And thanks to Tim for inviting you, and I apologize, I'm on LTE for our regular audience. Usually I'm a little bit more synchronized, but I look like a Japanese Godzilla versus Mothra movie now, with a bad translation. So we'll keep my intervention to a minimum. I'm just going to ask you, Sean, the typical question that we put to our first-time guests, which is how you got into technology in general. In fact, I told you an overly long version of mine before we went on the air. You can do long or short as you wish. And also, how you got to where you are now. What brought you into Telcom.io? Let me repeat that real quick, TELCOM.io. Get an introduction there, folks, while you're listening. Go ahead, Sean.
Right, well, firstly, I want to apologize for any background noise. I'm in a bit of a rainy Manchester today. So it all actually started with an advertisement in the Evening Standard in 1999. That's how I got into telecoms and technology. So my mum, whilst on the tube home, saw an advert for a company called Nortel Networks, which I had never heard of before. So she got home and she was really excited about this opportunity that she found, and it was for an apprenticeship with Nortel. They were going to pay for driving lessons. It was 2 years, then they'd pay for you to go to university, and you'd see the world, and it was just full of promise. And I mean, it sounded amazing, but again, at the time, I didn't know who Nortel were. I had no conception of the fact that they powered so much of the internet and just the pivotal part they played at the time with regards to the sort of pre-dot-com bubble burst there. So I put myself forward. I was 15 at the time. And I was lucky enough, you could say, to be selected as one of 30 out of 10,000 applicants to be a part of Nortel's apprenticeship program here in the UK, which effectively involved them creating and developing the leaders of tomorrow, so the future managers, future leaders and whatnot of the various different sections of Nortel. So started with Nortel when I was 16, moved around the various different components of the business, so worked in wireline, worked in wireless, worked for many big different projects here in the UK. So at the time, Nortel had customers like O2, they had Mercury before Mercury rebranded. They had Telewest was another big customer of theirs for their merger with NTL and whatnot. So started working with Nortel, did my 3-year apprenticeship, which brought me very nicely up to the point by which the dot-com bubble had burst and effectively cut a massive hole in the bottom of Nortel, which led to their headcount being reduced from 120,000 people worldwide to about 40,000. Right, that's some serious reduction in headcount, and that was in the space of probably 1 to 2 years they did that. It was an awful time to be in telecoms at the time, but upon reflection, it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me personally, because when they did finally offer me the opportunity to leave Nortel, it was to a whole world of contracting, which was another world that I'd never known about, didn't know existed. So I left Nortel in 2002, and I was offered the opportunity straight away to go and be a contractor in India, working for Reliance Telecom on a 1-year project building the first fiber optic backbone across India, using Nortel equipment and whatnot. So yeah, went into contracting from there. Spent the next 5-6 years contracting for Nortel around the world in places like Pakistan, Malaysia, Australia, America, the Caribbean, which was certainly my favorite assignment out of all the different contracting opportunities that came up. And then I decided to do probably the most crazy thing I could do, which was leave Nortel in 2008 to start my own business, as I felt like I'd done enough and I couldn't really progress much further in my career with Nortel, which you could say was fortuitous timing considering Nortel entering into bankruptcy in Chapter 11 the next year. So yeah, I'd like to say I could see that on the horizon, but it wasn't for that reason. No, it's just I've always had the bug to start my own business, get into entrepreneurship, and so I did that in 2008. And I could talk for a long time about what happened between 2008 and the start of Telkom, but to keep it telecoms related, I had a few business ventures that didn't work out. Definitely didn't choose a good time to start a business, given Lehman Brothers and the recession that happened in 2008. So for many reasons, the business ventures that I got into around then didn't work out, and so I found myself in Manchester as my business partner of 8 years now is based in Manchester. So I moved to Manchester, and we started a co-working space for the startup community, which is actually how I know Tim. So we started the first tech hub outside of London in the UK, in Manchester in 2012, as we saw an opportunity to create a focal point for Manchester's tech startup community, a hub whereby they could all congregate and get flexible desk space and resident desk space, and just bring people together, bring all the different actors in the ecosystem together to really help propel Manchester forward as a startup ecosystem. So we started that, and I'm actually sat in it right now. The second iteration of that co-working space I'm sat in right now, which is now called Spaceport X, so spaceportx.com. So how did Telkom start? Just to get onto that. Do you want me to go onto that, or should I continue?
Actually, I'd like to ask you one thing, and Tim can chime in on this too if he feels like it. Because you mentioned the co-working space. Tim, you recall that we met, not for the first time, but we met in Paris at that place that was also a co-working space mostly, or kind of a nursery, whatever that's called in startups. So my question to both of you is, and maybe you, Tim, first. Do you find, because you're working at one now, Tim, do you find that you are making contacts that are interesting? Because that's an interesting point in and of itself, actually.
Oh, for sure. So I find, in general, I find I get slightly less actual work done in a co-working space. So if I've got some code I know I need to write, I will stay at home, I will shut the door here, and I will get on with, and turn off social media and get coding. But in terms of kind of getting out there and finding out what everybody else is doing, getting new ideas, that sort of stuff, turning up at a co-working space, what I tend to try and do, although I don't manage it at the moment, is be in there maybe once a week. Just kind of bump into people I know, people I don't know, find out what's happening, find out about events that are happening in the city, meet random people who walk in, and just pick up on the general vibe of the city and who's doing what. And I find it valuable certainly to try and do once a week. I'm depending on what I'm doing, whether more or less plays out. And it also depends on what kind of work I'm trying to do. Like crypto stuff, like real protocol implementations, those kinds of things, I have to have no distractions, otherwise I just screw it up. But so it does depend a bit on what I'm working on as well.
Totally makes sense to me. Sean, have you observed a lot of people making connections? For example, are companies starting up by two or more people who have met at a co-working space that you're involved in?
Certainly, absolutely. I would say just to start that had I known about co-working spaces back in 2008, I would not be here today. My life would be very different right now because of some of the mistakes I made during my early years of being in entrepreneurship and business. I could have avoided, hands down, I would have avoided them had it not been for being in a co-working space, just due to the network. It's the network that you plug into from an opportunity, learning, and advice standpoint that is priceless when it comes to starting a company. So I advise anybody who's interested in starting a startup or just in entrepreneurship in general, seek out your local co-working space and just speak to people. It's incredible how much value you can derive from a conversation in a co-working space and what that might lead to. In terms of companies starting out of co-working spaces, what we traditionally see is more, people who would come to a co-working space joining existing companies that are in that co-working space. I personally haven't seen that many companies, certainly through our co-working space, be created out of two people who have met in that co-working space that have then gone on to achieve success, because the founding team is probably the most important part of a startup, in terms of each other's commitment to not only the idea but to one another. Like, I'm fortunate in terms of the business partner I have that we're very compatible when it comes to our skill sets and where we both want to get to on our commitment. And when you meet people at events or meet people at in a co-working space, it can be very difficult to just find that chemistry that is so important when it comes to a startup.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I've never what I would do if I was going to start something. Okay, you were about to tell us about how Telcom.io came into existence. So let's hear about that.
Well, maybe very briefly tell us what it is before you tell us how it came into existence. It kind of makes more sense that way around, I think, maybe.
Sure.
Okay, so the version that I like to go with is I see Telcom as an innovation platform. To me, Telcom is a platform that enables innovation across cities. Well, that's certainly where I'd like Telcom to be and be realized and seen as. But what Telcom is at the moment is it's an ISP. So it's I wouldn't say it's a traditional ISP. We've tried to, I would say that this opportunity has been more thrust upon us as opposed to something that we sought out. We've sat down and thought about, look, if we are going to do this, which obviously we are, and we're very far down the road off now, what don't we like about ISPs? And it's like, where do you start with that? It's probably one of the most common threads that you can find when it comes to complaints about companies. I mean, it's got to be ISPs and banks, right, are the two that people have the worst views of. So we sat down and just thought, like, what can we do to really set ourselves as different to everyone else that's out there? And I should say, the decisions that we took, that we did model on ISPs, backfired on us. So we've really tried to rethink the whole approach. So yeah, Telcom right now is an ISP, but we're working hard to evolve what that means and what Telcom will be seen as 1 to 2 years from now. So to give you a bit of context as to how Telcom came about, we never intended to start Telcom. Tom, the CTO, he was at a meetup event that he started here in Manchester for other people in the networking industry last night. And people were coming up to him to say, look, you should do a talk about starting an ISP, because who does that? Who in this day and age starts an ISP from scratch? And I can understand why there is that viewpoint towards it, because it is easily the hardest thing I have ever done or could ever imagine doing in my life beyond, I don't know, starting another utility, maybe a gas company or a water company, for instance. Like, it is so incredibly hard because people's expectations are that it's always on. There's no forgiveness, right? It's always got to work. It can't go down. There is, there is very little understanding when it comes to things going wrong, and things inevitably do. It's very difficult to maintain that always on, I guess, status when it comes to it. But anyway, going back to how Telcom started, we were looking at how we could evolve the co-working space here in Manchester, and a natural part of the evolution of that co-working space is to turn it into a big campus-type building that would effectively take what is 1 floor now and turn it into 6 floors of startup incubation and activity, and make an ecosystem in a building. So at the time, we were speaking to landlords around the city who were interested in working with us on that, because the only way you can do something like that is to work with a big property owner who has buildings that might be 60,000, 70,000 square foot in size. And it was as a result of one of these conversations that one of the key property landlords here in Manchester came to hear about my background in telecoms and put across that they owned a dark fibre network in what is Manchester's business district, central business district, a district known as Spinningfields. And he asked whether or not I'd be interested in doing a little bit of consulting work on the side to come in and give him my thoughts and viewpoint on, you know, what they could do with this asset, because they'd spent £1 million building the dark fibre network back in 2009 and had literally done nothing with it beyond provide connectivity to CCTV cameras. And they were paying for the connectivity on that dark fibre network and paying for someone to manage it. And it was just, it was mind-boggling how much money they were losing on this dark fibre network that they'd invested so heavily in, but because they'd never had a strategy beyond fibre, buzzword, we'll bring tenants in, we need dark fibre, they'd never been able to do anything with it. So they asked me whether or not I'd do, you know, a little piece of work, come in, give some advice and pointers on how they could potentially turn this loss-leading asset into something that would be more of a benefit to not just the estate, but also tenants on the estate. So did that, and very quickly on the back of having provided the results of this survey, they're like, oh, well, we've just bought this other big estate, could you do the same for that? So we did that, and then when it really, you know, changed from just doing a little bit of consultancy to actually becoming a full-blown ISP was they said, well, you know, we've got these tenants coming, why don't you be the person to apply the advice that you've put forward to us? You know, and I was like, well, who does that? Like, surely, like, how do I even go about starting to do that, right? Because that's what BT do, or that's what Virgin do, or, you know, even a local competitor that I don't want to name, that's what they do, who are like a hybrid wireless ISP. But yeah, so, you know, at the time, I just couldn't get my head around it. I was like, well, where do we even begin? How do we compete? How do we do this? So it's incredible whereby, you know, when it comes to doing something really big and complicated and where do you start, you just, I you know, forget who said this, but you just start at the start, right? So we're like, all right, well, let's get a gigabit pipe in. Let's provide gigabit services to this new estate that they've got, and let's light up this dark fiber network, because they hadn't really lit it up to the full extent that they could. So we rented a gigabit, you know, we took services from another provider, plugged that into the dark fiber network that we'd effectively been given to you know, make use of. And before long, word spread that we had begun to provide services to a select number of tenants at this new estate that they were moving people into. And I started to have my peers here in Manchester contact me, you know, from all across Manchester, not just in this limited little estate, and say, oh, wow, we've heard about what you guys are up to. Could you provide services to us? Because, you know, like BT are trying to charge us X, or Virgin are saying it's going to be 6 months, and all the standard complaints you hear about other ISPs. So, you know, we thought to ourselves at that point in time, like, could we actually do this? Could we take what we've done here and expand it across the whole city centre? And one thing led to another, and before long, you know, we found ourselves in a position whereby I would say our timing was fortuitous. I don't know if Tim has ever spoken about on this show, but over the past couple of years, there's been a voucher scheme available for businesses who want to get a good connection. So the government have really been trying to push super fast broadband. It's like one of the governmental targets that they've had. And as you know, as a part of that, their strategy has been to, you know, if I'm a business, I can apply to the government for a £3,000 grant to help my business get connected to a super fast connection, whether it be wireless or fibre. And I should say our timing to have come out at the same time as that really helped us, because we bootstrapped to date. So we were able to work with companies who were able to access that grant to pay us to effectively build this network out, you know, connection by connection, to now be in a position whereby we have a wireless network that covers all of Manchester city centre, including some of the suburbs. We've got a wireless network in Leeds. We've got, and I should say it's not just wireless, it's hybrid fibre and wireless. So we've got, you know, a network in Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Glasgow, London are the key cities where we have services. We're about to bring on Preston as well, which is a satellite town of Manchester. And again, if you had said to me 2 years ago, you know, you go from, you know, scratching your head about how you compete with BT to having a network that encompasses 5 cities, you know, in one, you know, town, I just wouldn't have believed you. Like, it's, you know, my I guess my mind state has had to evolve. My belief system has had to evolve to a point now when I'm like, yeah, of course you can do this. Like, and more people around the world should do this. Like, people who are unhappy with the state of their existing infrastructure or ISPs or providers, like, you can take action on this. And you see it so often in America with, you know, bands of communities getting together to effectively build out their own rural services because they are underserved. Like, no one has the commercial incentive to do something about the state of their internet connectivity, and you can do something about that. And that's what I've learned. That's what, that's what we've realized. You can really have an impact and, take matters into your own hands. So, yeah, went off on a few different tangents there, but that's effectively how Telkom started. So, it was never intentional, but now we are in a position whereby I'd like to think that we are the startups provider of choice, because we've really tried to rethink the way in which services are provided.
I should say that for all the kind of, oh, I'm not sure I could do this and that kind of thing that you're hearing from Sean, he is probably the most positive and optimistic person I've met kind of ever. I remember the first time I met him, I'm not sure he'll remember this, but he was doing this wacky tour around the whole of the UK, assessing cities on a city-by-city basis for startups, and I can't remember exactly what we talked about, but I remember that he and Doug were amazingly positive about being able to do things, and I remember thinking, God, that's just like, they're so optimistic and they don't stand a chance. And the next thing I know, he's gone away and done it. So like, okay, so Sean is underselling his positivity there, I would say. But I think the other thing that I'd be really interested to know is to what extent you think you've been lucky with the existence of dark fibre in Manchester. I mean, is that something that's true for other cities in the UK? And then kind of the knock-on question to that is, are there aspects of what you're doing that would only work in the UK and wouldn't work in, say, France or the US or whatever? So I'm kind of interested in the regulatory thing and the accident that you happened to fall over a big part of dark fibre.
Mm-hmm. Well, to answer the first question, I would say it would have been very hard, I think, for us to have taken the leap to becoming a provider, were it not for us being able to leverage some of the dark fibre assets that we were effectively given access to from day one. So, for instance, we manage, I think it's 3 or 4 dark fibre networks now, and the ability that gave us to provide services from, the way in which our model works is we tend to take services from a level 1 provider, whoever it might be, BT for instance, we'll take a gigabit circuit from them, and then we'll distribute that amongst many different companies. We'll sort of divide it up and carve it up based upon the requirements that those end companies have. If it weren't for the existence of those initial dark fibre networks, that take for instance Granada Studios here in Manchester, which is one of the networks that we manage. So ITV, who are a big broadcaster, moved out of their old TV studios, which takes up a good portion of Manchester city centre, to go to a new facility in Media City. So we moved in there. Thankfully, because they were a media company, they had this incredible dark fibre network that they've just had for many years that connected the entire site, all the different offices and various spaces across the site, and that from day one really helped to accelerate our growth from just being a sort of minor consulting entity to an actual an ISP. It really helped give us that leg up. And what I should say is, I have seen, looking around the UK, that there are quite a number of instances where councils have had the great idea to do something about the state of their own connectivity, and they have dug up the streets and they've put dark fibre networks in, but then they've really struggled to get the buy-in and engagement with other ISPs. So they've tried to make it open, because obviously a council can't turn around to a like to BT and say, oh, well, here you go, we've done this, now you just use it. They can't give that sort of state aid to BT, but nor can they preferentially do that to any other ISP. So they have to just make it this open platform that anyone can plug into and provide services on the back of. And there are a number of those that, because we always like to take the approach of, we'll take, to some extent, any opportunity. Like, we're there, we'll clasp onto any opportunity that comes our way. And not just an opportunity, but an opportunity where we see there be the potential to help people. So what you'll find is, in a lot of the instances where councils have had the great idea to put this service in, it's not benefiting anyone because they haven't been able to get the right partners to actually light that fibre up and do something with it. So we've had instances, and I don't know whether or not I can name some councils, but for instance, we were able to win the NHS on the back of one of these dark fibre networks, because they were just grateful that we'd come along and done something with this asset when others maybe out of arrogance or just not wanting to, play nice with other ISPs, chose not to. So there certainly are a surprising number of these networks around that you can tap into and just show a willingness to work with whoever the operator is, owner rather. So there is that. And sorry, Tim, what was your second question?
So the second question is, to what extent is the UK regulatory environment kind of unique and play a part in what you're doing?
So I would say that it is certainly a lot easier for us to do what we've done here in the UK, given the existence of organisations like OpenReach, who by law have to give us access to their network. Whereas my understanding, and having been over to America and looked at how we potentially provide services in America, which we're in the process of doing right now, is there isn't an OpenReach. So to give you an example of the differences, we won an innovation call by the New York Mayor's Office. So the New York Mayor's Office in 2015 put out a call for innovation, and they basically said, look, we've got all these assets across the city. We've got telegraph poles. We've got the overhead train lines. We've got the transit system. We've got the I think they call it the Edison ducts or something along those lines. They've got all these incredible assets that are there to be used by a potential broadband provider, but they didn't know what to do, because obviously it's the mayor's office. They're not experts when it comes to connectivity and broadband, but they were like, look, someone out there, if you've got a good idea for how we can fix the state of connectivity in New York City, please put forward a suggestion for how we could do that. And the reason why they came up with this call for innovation in the first place is, I was amazed when I heard this, but apparently 22% of homes in New York City don't have access to an internet connection. And the reason for that is a lot of these people probably, access the internet on their phones or whatever it might be, but 22% of New Yorkers don't have internet at home, like an actual internet connection at their home. And this is why the New York Mayor's Office felt the need to step in and do something about it in the only way they can, which is, look, this is what we have. Please put forward ideas for how we can fix this problem for people. So we put together a proposal for the Mayor's Office that, had a load of creative suggestions for how, if they were to give us access to these various assets, we could provide services to New Yorkers. So say you're a resident in New York, we could provide services to you, your home connection for, say, $8.50 a month, for instance. So we put together this whole business model, this idea and proposal, and we were selected out of 100 different, ideas and opportunities as the number one, to sort of proceed with. So they invited us across to have a meeting, and have since asked us to actually run a pilot with them in an area known as Mott Haven in the South Bronx, which we're due to start later this year, or possibly the start of 2017. But what I learned as a result of this process was that New York City has effectively been carved up by the three main providers, because there isn't an OpenReach. What you'll find is, over the many, many years, Comcast might have built out a network in Brooklyn, for instance, and Time Warner might have built out a network in the Bronx. And it's almost like there's this sort of tacit agreement between the providers that, look, you don't come into my turf, I won't come into your turf, we won't compete with one another, we can sit here on, these effective monopolies that we do have, and, at the end of the day, the end consumer loses out. So I was, I was stunned at the state of the connectivity market in New York, one of the leading cities in the world. But it also helped me realise just what an asset OpenReach is here in the UK, the fact that it is an open network that any provider can provide services on the back of. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, pulling OpenReach away from BT and how, bad OpenReach can be. And, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying OpenReach is perfect, far from it. Like, it's a nightmare to deal with, but at least it exists. And it's enabled us to do what we do, and without OpenReach, it would have been a lot harder for us to roll out across other cities the services that we, that we have.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to interject something that's relevant for a change on my end, which is that two things. First of all, speaking of New York, I'm sure most of you know who Om Malik is. And he has spoken about what he's done, which is, because the United States is a particular case, as you just said, Sean, and it's worse than you said, actually, because the entire country is plagued by the capitalist system that's in place, which is, according monopolies to one company, and then, they don't go anywhere with it. Here in France, we built on our tax dollars the system, and it's France Télécom, which is now part of Orange. And Orange is a company that has a lot of nice slides whenever you go see them anywhere about people smiling, and Zen is part of their campaign, and they're horrible. But they are obliged, France Télécom, as infrastructure owner, is obliged to sell wholesale to anyone who asks. And I think this is also something you're saying about, I guess, OpenReach, Sean, except that the maintenance of the line, and the reason I'm on LTE right now is because there's noise on the line. It isn't my installation, and it isn't my ISP's access point. It's the line. And granted, if you saw a picture of the line, you'd understand why, because it's atrocious. It's DSL and copper. But the point is, I just wanted to correct one thing, and then maybe we can get Michael to chime in on the United States as well. Correcting the fact that it wouldn't be the banks and the ISP, it would be the cell carrier, then the ISP, and then maybe the banks if anybody gives a crap. Anyway, Michael, you want to comment on the situation as you see it in cable and monopolies? A particular case, as it is 50 states, so it's different everywhere.
Please bring me fiber. Please bring me fiber now. I will pay you money. I will happily pay an install charge. I'll tell you our little story. I'm in Houston, Texas. We are the third or fourth largest major metropolitan area in the country. And we are a Comcast property from a cable TV and internet point of view, and an AT&T property from DSL or their hybrid fiber service. There's no Verizon here, but it doesn't really matter because Verizon's not building out Fios anywhere. I think what we've seen is a lot of corporate self-service going on from the perspective of there's been a lot of marketing that says the networks are expensive. Don't force us to build them out. We'll do what we want to do, and protect our monopoly stature. And then they turn around and sort of milk it for what it's worth, and they only build out to the extent that competitive pressure forces. But the competitive pressure comes from the likes of Google Fiber or municipal networks, and they've gone so far as to lobby to stop municipalities from building out municipal networks because that's unfair competition, except that their view is any competition is unfair competition. That ain't right. So there are independent providers. I mean, like the 1996 Telecom Deregulation Act basically got rid of this idea of you must make your infrastructure available to others. There used to be CLECs, competitive local exchange carriers who could deliver DSL over AT&T copper. I had a backup DSL circuit for years. I paid $100 a month for a 1.5 meg by 768K DSL service for a decade, and I only just shut it off in February. I also pay $100 a month for a 50 meg by 10 meg connection from Comcast Business. And for $100 a month, if I lived along the path that a company called Tachus is building out their fiber branch in this area, I could get gigabit symmetrical. Build me the fiber. I will happily pay the $3,000 for you to pull it to my house. I will lobby my neighbors so that it makes sense to pull it to this block. But somebody's got to want to do it. And sorry, rant off.
Yeah, you might want to talk to. I mean, we had on the VUC some years ago, and we should probably circle back with him. A guy called Bruff Turner, who runs a network in Boston, I think.
Yeah, I was the one who coordinated getting him on.
Right.
And at the time, they were like rah rah. Yeah, at the time they were like rah rah, sis boom ba, banging the drum, and they seem to have settled into being a business, but they're not expanding their geography outside the Boston metro.
I mean, I don't know to what extent. I mean, it would be interesting to get Bruff back and find out what he's doing with that, because I mean that was an interesting play. And I don't know if any of you know this, but in the annals of history, the way that the the Netherlands got their original ISP. I actually worked for a company that had a joint venture with them, so I kind of saw the inside of this, and they built their backbone. The local PTT there weren't really interested in having this internet thing work. So they quoted ridiculous prices for leased line connectivity between cities. I mean, really absurd prices. So the NLnet guys went to the railway and said, we hear you've got some unused fibre running along the tracks. Can we rent it off you? And sure enough, if you look at, and I don't know if this is still true, but if you look at the original network diagram of NLnet, you'll find that it's all of the city hubs sit on the stations. So they were all of their connectivity went between the stations over the railway line, and then they bought very cheap copper which I think were alarm circuits. So they would go to the PTT and say, we want an alarm circuit between here and here, and what the PTT would give you was basically a couple of twisted pairs between those two endpoints, and sometimes it would be up, that would be good enough for 2 megabit, and sometimes it wouldn't. And when it was, then that was great. You went away and did that. But that sort of avoidance of PTT stuff has been in the DNA of certainly the European internet kind of forever. I'm not sure whether that's true in the States or not.
What I wonder is kind of what comes next, and as the cable carriers have become the dominant internet service providers, followed by the mobile companies, and that's, mobile just because the trend towards everything being mobile generally, but what I wonder is, does the existing infrastructure, whether it's HFC or whether it's fiber to copper, as UVerse does, what comes after that? Do they actually bring fiber to the home at some point? What compels that? Because I see so much rotting copper infrastructure, and seriously, my neighbor has UVerse, and there was a forum thread recently sort of comparing everybody's experience with UVerse, which makes its competitive position is it's cheaper, and you don't have to deal with with Comcast, who are of course atrociously bad to deal with. But then one asks, is AT&T any better? The answer is no. But somebody has to be at the bottom, and somebody has to be one above the bottom.
They're still both negative numbers, though, in satisfaction.
Yeah. There's still companies that you don't want to deal with. They have less favorable rating than the IRS, which is.
I loved the statement that the AT&T slogan, which is, "We're not happy unless you're unhappy." Anyway. Sean's back with us. So, Sean, let's move on to how you deliver this specifically, because when I asked him, well, how do they deliver internet, and he said, I don't know, anyhow, any way you can or something. So it was a great answer, but let's hear a little more about that end of it.
I would say Tim's really hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, he's certainly not far off the mark. Just before I answer that, I just want to make a note that Google Fiber is a massive inspiration for us, here at Telkom. We're constantly looking at what Google Fiber are doing, what Google are doing with Fiber, what they're doing with Project Fi, and certainly also what Facebook are doing, or what they've announced that they're going to be doing with the network down in San Jose. So we're always looking across the pond and trying to take best practices that we can, and places like Chattanooga as well. It's just incredible what you can achieve, when you actually go about trying to, and you get the city council and utilities on board. So that's massive for us. Yeah. So
you just briefly, you missed a thing, which was we had a guy on a while back who's doing a point-to-point Wi-Fi network in Boston, who we should introduce you to, because I think you'd think it. His experience, if he's prepared to share it with you, might be pretty valuable about how to avoid the pitfalls. So maybe Randy or Michael can do the link up there, because I think it would be useful for you.
Will do.
definitely.
Yeah, you're
So,
right. We should get Bruff back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're particularly interested in, I mean, we're interested in everything about sort of how you deliver, but I mean, I've looked at wireless ISPs. I've looked at setting up my own wireless links to try and access things that are literally a mile and a half away from me.
mhm.
Because if the fiber's over there, I'll buy some Ubiquity stuff and I'll get it. Anyhow, go ahead. What's your infrastructure?
So we've been through, a process of trial and error. It's very difficult to know. There's so much out there on the market. It's very difficult to know what's right, what's not right, what the correct tool might be for the particular task at hand. And I should say we've got to a point now whereby, as I say, our network's hybrid, dependent upon whether or not a customer is in reach of our wireless network, or if they're in a site that might be advantageous to the wireless network. We'll either look at bringing in fiber or wireless. We tend to operate 1 gig, core wireless networks throughout the cities that we work in. So we have a resilient ring that we build around the cities, which has many different pitfalls and issues that we have to overcome. The main one being access to key buildings. I mean, one thing that we've had a bit of an issue with here in Manchester is there's a local competitor who've, I'll tip my hat to them. They've been around for 13 years. We've learned a lot from the way in which they provide services, and again, we've been inspired in some respects to do things, and certainly run with wireless as an option. So, yeah, we build out a core network in each of the cities that we operate in to ensure that we don't have any sort of single points of failure when it comes to that core. And dependent upon the level of service that the customer has asked for from us, we'll either provide microwave type services to that end customer, or we will use Mimosa. So Mimosa is one that we've used quite a bit here in the UK, and we like quite a lot. We do use some Ubiquity. We've looked at Cambian, a few different providers. Like we're not necessarily precious when it comes to the equipment manufacturer that we work with, but at the same time, we don't want to have 100 different equipment manufacturers in the network. So we do a lot of work with Fastback, who are an American company. So they provide a lot of our core infrastructure, and also companies like Siklu as well have been great for us. So I should say, like, the way in which Telkom differs from anyone else here, certainly in the UK market. I know that there are American ISPs who have adopted this approach, but we have transparent pricing, so we don't have prices that will change based upon someone's affordability level, where they're based, what answers they might give to to preset questions that we have. Our prices are published on the website, and that sets us apart from absolutely everyone else out there in the market here in the UK. But that also makes it difficult for us and presents challenges in the way in which we provide services to work with the constraint of the pricing that's just out there. Because we can't say, for instance, oh, there's a law firm over there, they can pay this much, then we can afford to buy this equipment. We can't do that. We have to always have technical solutions that fit with the business model and pricing structure that we have, and that's why we will use 5 gigahertz in some instances. We will use microwave where we can, and where the business case permits, but we'll never have a hop in our network that includes 5 gigahertz links, for instance, because there are questions around 5 gigahertz, and that's where we're confident that we can provide end services if it's one hop away from one of our core stations, one of our core pop sites, and that's how we tend to operate. But as I say, we do a lot of fiber as well, and it just really depends on the business case.
So for the microwave, do you have to get a license, or is that?
Yes, yeah. I mean, licenses can cost as little as £50 with Ofcom. So you just need to register the frequencies that you intend to use in that particular area, and have license to do so. So I don't know how it works in other countries in that respect. I mean, we're due to learn about that in America shortly.
Cool. The other thing I noticed on the website, we've been kind of talking about internet connectivity, but I see you also do voice over IP, which is what this what this group originally was talking about the whole time, and we kind of, frankly, I got a little bit bored with it, and the industry settled in such that it was no longer quite so interesting to talk about every week, basically. There's things happening, but it doesn't happen as fast as it used to. But what I'm interested about is that, I mean, we've been huge proponents of HD for years, and it's nice to see that that's one of the things that you're selling VoIP on, as HD. How do people respond to that? Is that something that people appreciate, or?
I would say it's not necessarily people understand. We're forever coming up against explaining the advantages, benefits of why someone should have voice over, or why VoIP is reliable, why they should have VoIP over a standard system, and certainly why a hosted VoIP solution is more advantageous than having a PBX in your office from Daisy Communications or whatever it might be. And one of the services that we have built out as a result of that is this sort of transition package whereby we'll take you from a position of maybe having a physical PBX in your office to having this hosted cloud solution that we offer. And what I would say on the VoIP front is we currently resell another VoIP platform that someone else has developed, but we've got something I would like to think is groundbreaking in development. That I'd love to come back on and talk about this in a couple of months once we've got this ready. But I think what we're planning to do with VoIP hasn't been done anywhere else in the world. Or at least I like to think so. I've not heard of it before, so that's something I'd love to come back on and talk about in a couple of months.
Oh, we'd love to hear it. That sounds fun.
Or we'll send some folks over to kneecap you. So you can incidentally, where are you going to be in the U.S.? What market is drawing your attention?
So because of the opportunity we have in New York, we'll be starting in New York, and then we'll see from there. I mean, it's interesting with Google Fiber recently buying is it Webpass, I believe, the wireless ISP that operated in some of the markets within which they operate, and reading more into why they've done that, it's probably it's as much about Google Fiber looking at wireless as a potential delivery mechanism, but it's also access to buildings. Like something that you find here in the UK, and also I was surprised to hear is quite prevalent in the US, is landlords will sign up with, say, a Comcast, and then they'll make it so prohibitive for anyone else to access that building that it just doesn't make sense. And it sounds like Webpass have had a lot of buildings in the cities within which they operate that now Google Fiber can access, that had they not bought Webpass, they might not have been able to provide services to those end customers. And that was interesting for me to hear that there is this, I wouldn't say sort of cartel arrangement between landlords and the big ISPs in America, because we don't necessarily have that as much. I've not come across that as much with the larger ISPs here in the UK.
It was a way of property management companies to extract some value out of setting up exclusive arrangements to say you're going in this building or in this apartment complex. And Houston is quite famous, not so much for the tall apartment buildings like you're going to see in New York, but for great sprawling 2, 3, 4-story walk-up complexes. And so a great large complex with perhaps 400 or 500 units gets signed over to Comcast exclusively or AT&T exclusively, and of course the property management firm and the landlord share in the revenue there, and to the detriment of the customers.
Mm-hmm.
But so it goes.
Yeah, and I mean the nearest equivalent in the UK is office buildings. You will. I mean, I won't name the company, but we had an office with one of the kind of office providers, and back in the day, and I literally couldn't. I mean, I still have a Class C IPv4 network that's provider independent, and I literally couldn't route it into my office because the contract with their provider meant that there was only one service they could offer, and it was fantastically expensive. And basically, I got a pile of free phones with it, which I didn't want. So it's like I was tied to this thing in a way that I really didn't want to because I picked a particularly nice office space. And actually, interestingly, that was in a district which you now serve. So I wonder if that's changed. And we should talk quietly over a pint to find out whether that situation is changed.
Absolutely, more than happy to.
Here's an interesting case in point. This is a fiber network provider near me. This is their network. My location, I don't know if you can see my, where are we here? Don't know if you can see my, that's to the west of me, that's to the east of me, that's me. and so it's literally like a mile and a half maybe to over here. It's probably half a mile to over here, right? And if I could get a clear line of sight, and if it didn't violate their terms of service, I'd put in a wireless socket. Running up Heights Boulevard, that's a 10G fiber that they have.
Wow.
And,
do you have any friends who live on Heights Boulevard?
I'm about to make some friends.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm hosting a wine tasting in the hope of engaging the neighborhood and finding out who actually has this thing.
Backhand broadband dealing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We have an old friend of the show who used to be the measure of voice quality. I won't name him, but he's got a place out in the middle of nowhere, and I saw recently he bought a 40-meter tower second-hand on eBay. And I said, what are you doing with that? He said, well, I'm going to put a microwave dish on it, and pointed at my friend's house down the valley who has fiber, and I'm going to have a gigabit into the house over this thing. But it has to be that high to get over the pine trees. So those are the things we do for bandwidth. But, I was going to ask, where are you? This is something in the show we have to ask on the show. It's like there's a couple of questions we have to ask. HD is one of them. The other one is IPv6. Where are you with IPv6?
So this is a question I wish my technical co-founder could answer. But I know that we are fully IPv6 compliant. Like, we've assigned every single one of our customers an IPv6 address, because one of the biggest issues we faced is access to an exhausted pool of IPv4. Like, we just can't get IP addresses. Unless we've got hundreds of thousands to spend buying someone else's, allotment of IP addresses, we are so restricted in our ability to access those IP addresses. So we're doing our best to encourage as many of our customers to take up IPv6 and have that be the service they're provided with, as opposed to IPv4.
Okay, cool. James.
Hello.
So James works for TruePhone. Sean, James, say hi.
Hi, James.
Hello, Sean. How pleasant to meet you.
You too.
I apologise for being late.
You're very late. You've missed all the fun. But Andy was right. 6 o'clock was dead on. You were 5 minutes earlier than Andy's prediction.
Well, I could have been here 10 minutes earlier, but you know what it's like when you've got a new car. You just have to press those little buttons, don't you?
Well, you couldn't get out the door.
What? No, I just love having a new car with a micro SD slot. And I was working out how to slave an Android handset. What's it called? MirrorLink. So you end up with your display from your Android handset, but on your touch screen thingy, what's it? So
Okay, that's cool.
I'm going to have hours of fun with this, I can tell. But anyway, Sean, UK's fastest internet straight to your door. Now there's it. But you can't get it to my door, though, can you?
Depends who your landlord is. That's what I'll say.
Well, I'm my landlord.
Oh, okay. Well, then it depends where you're located. As we do some of the UK's fastest internet, more to multi-tenancy units at the moment.
Right, but sadly not in the Chalk Valley on the Dorset-Wiltshire-Hampshire border.
Unfortunately not. If we raise a bit more investment, then you never know.
So
Yeah.
do you do London at all? Can't remember. You did list the cities, so have you looked at London?
Yeah, so we have services in London at the moment, primarily fibre services. We are about to build out a wireless network across West London, primarily just for one customer, but that's going to enable us to provide services to many other customers across West London. So we are in the process of doing that.
Okay, if we put in our own fibre, would you be able to run just on the back end and the interconnect?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually were approached about this by another gentleman who lives in a lovely part of the country, out in the countryside, just south of Manchester, and he asked us whether or not we could bring fibre into his barn, and then
south of Manchester. Is there such a place?
You southerner, James, behave.
Yeah, he wanted us to bring a fibre into his barn, put a mast in his back garden, and distribute services to his neighbours. I mean, obviously they're all quite wealthy, these neighbours, and himself too. But just so they could all have access to great connectivity, because they've got all these amazing houses, but shocking internet.
Funny you should say that, but James Tagg, who's the founder of TruePhone, was in exactly the same position. He lives out in North Kent, just south of Oxted, Crockham Hill. And BT said, oh, it's not cost effective for us to put broadband in. So he said, okay, I will do it. And so he put in 5¼ miles of fibre across the fields, most of which he owns, I hasten to add. And he now has a little stub mast on top of his little hill, and he now supplies the 3 surrounding villages.
There you go. That's what I mean, taking it into your own hands.
Yeah, but I want to do a similar sort of thing down here. I'm the erstwhile chairman of the parish council, and we live in an area which we've got marginal fibre to the cabinet at the bottom end of the village, but this village here is a longitudinal, spread out village. And so the bottom end is fine. Top end is a complete train wreck. Not helped by the fact that we've got aluminium cables.
Oh, right.
So if you can get 0.5 megabit per second at the top end of the village, you're doing okay. It's on a good day when it's not raining. So yeah, I've been looking forward to meeting somebody who can kind of run the back end and do the plumbing at the back end. We can always put fibre in because we kind of own the fields.
Mm-hmm.
And whizzing a fibre 2 meters down around the edge of the field is really easy. We've got somebody here who can put it in the ground at a rate of about 1 mile an hour. And when we say fibre, we don't mean a fibre, we mean 24 fibres at a time.
Well, we should talk off this call.
Yeah, there certainly are opportunities. And, of course, we've now got the government, basic broadband grant, which is £300. The basic grant is £300 per dwelling,
Mm-hmm.
which has less than 2 megabit per second, and we've got quite a few of those.
Is that not automatically just awarded to BT, or is that open to other suppliers?
No, it isn't.
Right.
There's a list of approved people, and BT is not on the list.
Right.
So it's really brought in to subsidise satellite broadband.
Yeah.
But since then, other players have got in on the act, and so we've got fixed wireless, and we've got fibre, do-it-yourself fibre. And the modus operandi seems to be to put in fixed fibre to key places, and then extend that with wireless. It's the obvious way to do it, really. But still, here we are. I look forward to watching the playback of your school.
Yeah, no, we've hit the hour. So I don't know if anybody's got I haven't looked at IRC. If anybody's got questions on IRC or ZipDX for Sean, but otherwise we should probably let him go and find a beer or whatever else he's got planned for his evening.
Good point. I'll reiterate that if you're on ZipDX, hit *6 and ask your question. I don't see any. The only question on IRC is who's speaking, and I answered that with Sean Gibson. So.
When he gets a chance, that is.
Well, actually, Sean, I sent you 2 intros, so if nothing else, we have that. A couple of connections that may well be very interesting. I'm looking at IRC. I don't see anything. No one has clicked on *6 to unmute themselves. So hopefully you and Brock can get together, and that's a good idea. We should invite him back, which I did in the intro. So to Michael and Tim. Other than that, if no one has any old business or new business, we'll let Sean go. I'll leave a pause here. Just a long breath from James. All right, we're gonna excuse me. We're gonna enter into our mature audiences only version here. So we're going to cut.
Well, Sean, if you've got anything else that you haven't
Yeah.
said, you feel you want to throw in before we kill the recording,
Good point.
now's your moment.
No, just thank you for inviting me onto this, and I'd love to come back and have a talk about Tone, which is our advanced VoIP solution in a couple of months. So you'll have me back. I'd love to come back and talk about that.
Oh, we'd love to. We'd love to. It sounds good.
Absolutely. And let me just put a large telcom.io URL into my video before we cut off. And thanks to everybody. Thanks to the community. This is really a true community. This isn't just talking into the air. Well, I do usually, but other than that, and James is nodding. Thank you to everybody, and thanks, Sean, and we will look forward to having you back soon.
Great. Thanks, guys. Take care.
So don't pop off yet, Sean. I just want to tell you something. As soon as we go off live.
We'll be private, but still on ZipDX. Good night, everybody. Good night, Gracie, and whoever else is out there, Mrs. Glanningham, and so on. Bye.